Really excited for our next panel here today. We have another panel discussion lined up for you. This time we're hearing from some influential CEOs and focusing on the theme moving forward, how to bring it together. So how do we bring so many different sectors and communities together? And of course, it's not just about managing the areas of work, it's competing agendas, priorities, pressures, funding, timing, and resources. So how do we work through some of those challenges and make change in our community? So without further ado, I want to invite forward our esteemed panel members, and we have representatives from a number of key organisations joining us for this session. So please, our first panellist, Joseph Posta. Joseph is the CEO of Multicultural New South Wales. His focus is on improving services for new Australians while safeguarding the cultural heritage of established communities. Multicultural New South Wales has flourished under his guidance, expanding to 90 staff and over 1,300 interpreters and translators. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, Multicultural New South Wales worked very closely with Aboriginal Affairs New South Wales during COVID to ensure community voices were heard and responded to from within governments. Welcome.
Thanks.
Ronni Khan AO, founder and CEO of OzHarvest, is a pioneering social entrepreneur who's revolutionised Australia's approach to food waste and is known as the food rescue expert. Yeah, come forward, Ronni, here in Australia. And of course, we know that she captivates audiences with her advocacy, activism and passion for humanity. Her mission, of course, to end waste and hunger, and that is supported by some of the finest chefs in the country. Also joining our panel, Alistair Ferguson, the Executive Director and founder of Maranguka. Alistair's approach to community development and empowering communities has many staunch supporters from inside communities, from governments and many other sectors, with his approach to fostering long-term collaborations that drive positive changes with community all the way from Burke. Boe Rambaldini is an elder of the Bundjalung Nation on the New South Wales North Coast and brings a remarkable wealth of experience to his new role as CEO of the Aboriginal Health and Medical Research Council. He's an honorary associate professor at Macquarie University, co-leads the Durali Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Research and Education Centre, and his commitment to the Poach Centre for Indigenous Health at the University of Sydney is further evidence of his ambition to advance the health and well-being of Aboriginal communities. Brianna Casey is the CEO of Foodbank Australia, the nation's largest hunger relief organisation. She advocates strongly for systemic changes to our food systems to create sustainable and meaningful changes that will help reduce food relief across Australia. Her leadership also extends to supporting the Australian Childcare Alliance New South Wales. For many years, she represented the New South Wales Farmers Association and is deeply involved in community service, where she continues to drive impactful changes to food security with the next generation. And finally, on our star-studded panel here, Adele Laughton. Adele is the CEO of Future Farmers Network, a not-for-profit that focuses on building education and engagement of young people in Australian agriculture. She chairs the Ag Education Working Group, which is a national initiative to increase engagement and career pathways with a future focus. And she is also the Vice President of the Queensland Social Enterprise Council, QSEC, and Adele passionately supports initiatives that foster future generational leaders to find a balance between sustainability, business and community. So, big round of applause for Adele and all our panellists. Well, as you've just heard, all of our panellists are leaders in their field with expertise that spans quite the diverse range of sectors, but all dedicated to shaping more inclusive food systems for all. So We want to delve into some of their insights on sustainability, diversity and innovative change. Now, I did have some questions for you guys, but we've sort of been yarning offline, and it's the afternoon here, and I think we might just throw out the script and just have a bit of a yarn amongst ourselves in terms of the theme for this panel moving forward. How do we bring it all together? Really keen just for you guys. We'll keep this pretty open conversation if that suits, and just have a bit of a yarn about what you do and your vision of how we can bring it all together, all of the people in the room, this community that we're trying to build to address this wicked problem. Really keen to get your insights. So we might start down the end and work back, put you on the spot.
Don't start with me. I've got like the government approved talking points that I'm supposed to stick to. I think, I'm not... Sorry, first thing I would like... Phone's going bananas. First thing I would like to say is... multiculturalism's been alive and well in this great state and this great country for 65,000 years. So I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal people. I don't know. You've listened to a lot of smart people today. I'm not that smart. I just think the time for talk is over. I think the time for reviews is over. I think the time for going back and convening national frameworks and national discussions around this. We know there's, these two leaders particularly, we know there's a shortage of food getting to the areas it needs to. In my opinion, we've got to try some more stuff. We've got to get some more data. We've got to get some more information. We've got to learn as we go. And I think it's that incremental learning that'll help solve the problem. I think if we sit here and we keep developing frameworks and solutions to this idealistic state, we're going to fall 5 years or 3 years behind and we're never going to catch up. So from my point of view, I'm no expert in this space, but I just think the time for strategies and plans is over. It's about listening to people with lived experience that are at the core of it, that are navigating this every day, back at Burke, Warriner, asylum seeker, refugee communities that we work with, listening to them, putting them at the centre of the decision making, getting government as a part of it, getting some of the NGOs and the other providers in this space, elevating our community leaders, religious leaders, uncles, aunties, and then that is the basis for how we determine our investment. And we don't have to have all the answers when we start, but we also got to be getting a hell of a lot better at putting trust in people to help us, because I still think there's this prism that this is only an issue for vulnerable people, and it's actually not. It's an issue for society. It's a bigger issue than we want to acknowledge it as a government, and I think both at state and Commonwealth, and I think it's just time to get on with it. That's just my view. Sorry. That's good. It resonates. Sorry. If I was a consultant, I would have sat here and said, you need another review. Sorry, Ronni.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. I too would like to acknowledge that my feet are on Indigenous land and pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging. First of all, you've said it all. There is no more time, I think, for more reviews. And I've missed most of today, but it sounds from my people and anyone who I've spoken to in the last half an hour that it's been an extraordinary day. So this is what it's all about. It's about collaboration, it's about listening, and it's really about working together. And, if I look at OzHarvest, we will be 20 next year. And it's wonderful that we've delivered 240 meals, and it's wonderful that we're stopping waste, and that's hugely important. But actually, we also need to look at what it's going to take to reduce hunger, what it's going to take to shift and change for all of us. And we can only do that together, and we can only do that by talking, listening, hearing, and then taking action. And so I think this is the time. We've got less than 3,000 days to fulfill the UN SDG goal to halve food waste. It's going to take education, and we all need to be willing to learn and to listen and to act.
Thank you. Look, certainly from my perspective, I think it brings a whole sort of new, not so much new, but I think the uniqueness of the irony of sort of distance and remoteness and being in a rural setting, what that means in terms of the not only cost, but I think more importantly the health overall in terms of our community, because I think over the last 237 years, but who's counting, in terms of how, our health has deteriorated over that time, and I don't think people quite understand or realise just how unwell our communities are. And I think a lot of that has to do with the quality of, particularly with food, etc. But I guess I came here today, and certainly I want to, before I go any further, I certainly want to acknowledge our elders, past, present and emerging, and our traditional owners, of course, and the Bidjigal mob and also the Dharawal peoples. And so I think it's really important that, this morning's events and the amazing presentations and stories and experiences, and again this afternoon and tomorrow, it'll all be so sort of validating. But I think I'm really excited about the next steps in terms of rubber hitting the road and really operationalising now. I guess moving forward, that as earlier it was referenced as ingredients, and but I think the ingredients are in this room. And that provides an amazing, an extraordinary recipe, I think, in terms of the success that we'll need into the future. But that's just a bit of a bird's eye view. But I think in terms of the context and background for me is that I'm 8th generation doing this type of work, and I didn't really have a choice. And not that it's about me, but it's about the unfinished business. And one thing I just want to share is that, particularly from the old mission and reserve days, I'm mindful with a movement that was really and a call to action, I think, by some really key individuals. And one of those was my great-great-uncle, who referenced and wrote a letter to his brother, William Ferguson, from Duncan Ferguson to William Ferguson, who's my great-grandfather. And it was in terms of the conditions of living on a mission, and this was in Menindee, in far western New South Wales on the Barker River. And but it was the conditions of that food quality, that there was weevils in the flour, there was that the meat was rotten, it was green. These are the conditions that and we look back on that, and we learn from that, and it was so unnecessary. And so I just want to plant that seed, and just for food for thought, pardon the pun, but I think it's really important from where we come from to where we are now, the opportunities that we have as a state, but also as a nation, to really address these legacy issues and look at the not only the equity but the quality and the equality that's really required too. So and I tend to ramble on a bit too, so I won't put you through.
Thank you. I don't really have much to say now that you said it all for me. I'd like to acknowledge that we're still on conceded land, and pay my respect to elders past and present. I'm going to go back a bit further. Over 237 years ago, we were the healthiest people on this continent. We had no health problems at all. And sadly today we're at the mercy of a health system. And we're there because of government's interference with our lives. We had a well-balanced diet. We lived in harmony with every living thing around it, whether it be an animal or a plant or another human being. Everything we did in harmony with the environment, and it made us as one with the environment. But I was looking out at the ocean there from outside there, and I was looking and thinking what my people would be thinking when they saw those big sails coming in, and wondering what the hell was going on here. They didn't know that their lives were going to be changing completely when that boats hit the shore. And somebody rammed a flag in the sand and said, this belongs to England now. So it saddens me because from that day on, they had complete control over our lives, complete control. But there are a lot of terrible things that happened before that. There was murders, our women were raped, our children were killed, our water holes was poisoned, there was massacres right across this country. And there's still a lot of unfinished business in this country. And there's we're not going to heal until we actually deal with the truth of this country and what happened. It's not a pretty picture back there, but that's where the truth lies, and we have to look back there. And you know, you can find the truth. You can find the truth in any library on this continent, because we had the oral history and the other side had the written history. It's not about laying blame or pride or guilt. We want to leave that outside the door. We're not about mending fences, because fences keep people in or out. We want to build bridges with our people and with our communities, and so we can all live together in harmony like it used to be. Given that we've got the worst, we're the Aboriginal communities out there that haven't even got clean drinking water in a wealthy country like this, and I shake my head. And every Premier and State Minister signed up to closing the gap, 15 years ago, and you know, signing the paper is just a tick a box for those people. There's no real genuine commitment to try and bring about some change. And there's a lot of work to do to bring about change. And we can't do it on our own. We're 3%, the other side's 97%. The other side's got complete control over all the Western systems, over the finances of this country and the wealth of this country, and we haven't got that. So how we can do what we can do for our communities to make them well is really an uphill battle for us. We work together. We've got Aboriginal medical centres that provide a primary health care right across this state, and they all punch above their weight. And, you know, it saddens me that, that our health isn't improving. Every Prime Minister that's given a report to the Federal Parliament has clearly indicated that that gap's not closing. In fact, it's widening. Our jails are bursting at the seams with our adult people. The juvenile justice institutions, the same, they're bursting at the seams. There's a lot of stories you can tell. When I was working at another place in the University of Sydney, I was in the Sydney School of Medicine, and I was heading up this Aboriginal Health Centre. A couple of doctors came in there and wanted to do some volunteer work for us and help treat my people and get them well. And mate, was I excited about that. I said, when can you start? And they said, well, we can start next week. But we can't do anything about the past. We can start here and move forward and try and heal your people and get them well. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and I thought, well, you know, when you've got somebody coming into your surgery or into your clinic, I said, what sort of things do you say to them? Do you ask them if they've got a history in diabetes? Do you ask them if they've got a history in heart disease? You need to know what happened back there so you can develop a plan right here, right now, to make them well in the future. You can't do it without knowing what happened back there. And like I said, it's not a pretty picture back there, but it can heal us, and it can make us all come together and work together to try and improve the health of my people.
Incredibly well said. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute joy to be on Bidjigal country and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I grew up on Bundjalung country, and I reflect on a saying that we would all know, that quite often it's not what you read on a page or what you hear that you remember, it's how someone made you feel. And I think what we've heard today is a series of stories that should make us feel, one, pretty ashamed of some of the things that have gone on and the lack of action on what is patently obvious that we need. I feel angry about the fact that tonight 500,000 households across Australia will struggle to put a meal on the table. I feel ashamed that First Nations Australians are 3 times more likely to suffer from food insecurity than white Australians. I feel embarrassed that as a privileged white woman on this panel, should my voice even be heard right now? But I also recognise that we are helping 1 million people a month right now with food relief through Foodbank, and I have an obligation to provide a voice. I'm not the only voice, there's many voices, and there are extraordinary voices. But if not now, then when? When are we going to look to that ugly stuff behind us, learn from it, feel heard? And I think that's what I've heard today, is a lot of frustration that we've had inquiries, we've had Senate inquiries, we've had royal commissions, we've had public hearings. I've written more submissions in the last 5 years than I think I have in the last 20, and I live, work and breathe policy and advocacy. And every time we see a change in government, we see a new review, a new inquiry, a new committee, and that's great. I know people want to create change, but let's just get it done. Let's actually get the change happening. We've got so many experts in this country that know what needs to change. I think what we have right now that sets us apart from the past is an angry mob. We actually want to be part of this change. We want to walk on those bridges. We want to be able to build them with you. We want to be able to create the change that's necessary, because the fact that 1.3 million children have lived with severe food insecurity at some point in the last 12 months, and you'd recall from the earlier presentations, food insecurity is a spectrum, from skipping meals to being anxious about eating to not having anything to eat for an entire day. 1.3 million children at that end, the severe end of food insecurity. And let's have a think about what that looks like on country. So please know, we want the change, we want to be part of the change, and if not now, then when?
I also pay my respects to elders past and present. I do work in schools, and we get children to ideate a business that makes the world a better place. And there's a big focus on some of the businesses they ideate. A lot of girls will ideate period poverty. You'll get homelessness. I never get OzHarvest, and I never get Foodbank. So I suppose I'm here to do the lens on why. Why are our young people not realising this is an issue? And when I grew up, and I suppose my lived experience was, we didn't stream our shows, we watched television. I would see a Smith family ad, and there'd be a little girl on the road, and she'd have a blanket, and I would be like, oh, she doesn't have a home. We don't see any of that anymore. Our kids stream TV, they're on their digital devices, and so this issue is actually not transparent to young people coming through, which are the future. These are the people that are going to ideate organisations that solve issues like this, and it's not an issue that's transparent to them. And thankfully we have Foodbank doing breakfast clubs, but that's also called a club so that children that are suffering food insecurity don't feel ashamed to seek food. So the issue again is not brought forward to our future generations, and it's not a conversation we have around the dinner table because we don't even see it on TV, and it's not coming into our house anymore. So I think from a young perspective, how do we put a spotlight on the issue, because these are the people that are going to come forward and solve it. And I think that's sort of the lens I bring today, is it's not being shown. These kids aren't ideating solutions to this problem, and this is what we need moving forward.
So we're hearing from all of our panel, as well as our other speakers here today, this call for action. We're sick of reports and talks, and we really want to, all of us in the room, I think, can agree, action on this. So I'm really keen, we might go back the other way down the panel. What action do you think we can take right now to start addressing this and we'll acknowledge it's a very big and complex problem, but really keen to hear your insights on that.
I think it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, so we don't talk about it publicly enough. And I think it's something that we need to be bringing to the forefront as a real issue. I think we need to be talking about it in schools in a positive way, and also highlighting that this doesn't just happen to people in regional communities. This can happen to a house next door to you. Cost of living is through the roof. There's lots of ways that they can frame this. I think education is fundamental to start having those conversations really young. I think particularly when you get to secondary schooling, we can really be developing and talking about solutions. What are some solutions? Could you have a social enterprise where 50% of your profits goes to like a food bank or an organisation that is supporting this? Can you ideate another solution that could further support this sector? I think there's lots of ways we can tackle it for those younger years. Obviously, I'm CEO of Future Farmers Network. We've got 18 to 35-year-olds in agriculture who are very aware of these issues. I suppose they come at it from a sustainability perspective as well. But I think it's a generational issue, and we need to be having those conversations to young people, because otherwise we put a Band-Aid on something now, but it doesn't solve it for the future.
I think that's a really good point, and I think we have to have this conversation right across every sector and every industry and every age group as well. And there's some small things that could make such big changes, and I was having a great yarn outside. One of the campaigns that we're leading and the policy work we're leading is calling for a national food donation tax incentive. Sounds really unsexy. It's got tax in it, let's be honest. Doesn't make me excited normally. However, this is a good tax. We know in overseas jurisdictions where there is a tax incentive for farmers and small businesses and transport and logistics companies to donate product rather than dumping it, it makes material change in the amount of food that we can actually rescue through our surprise chains. We don't have a supply chain at Foodbank, we have a surprise chain. We never know what we're going to get day in, day out, but I know our surprise chain will be filled with fresh produce, more and more fresh produce, if we could just make, with a sweep of a pen, one change to our tax laws in this nation that would mean more fresh fruit and vegetables are going to every community across Australia. That is one tiny change that would cost the government next to nothing, deliver a social return on investment of $2 billion per annum, and all it takes is political will and leadership. It's those small changes with big impacts. They're the ones I get excited about, and that's what we need to be doing. Sure, we can talk about food security strategies. Sure, we can talk about the big pieces led by Prime Minister and Cabinet. Let's just chip away at it. It's much easier to eat an elephant one bite at a time.
I think you hit the nail on the head there by saying somebody's got to show some will. I don't think there is any real genuine commitment from government. In fact, governments are the ones that put us in this mess we're in today, and they just have no idea to how we're going to get out of it. I know when I work with communities and I sit down with them and I talk to people in community, they have identified the issues that are impacting on their communities, but they also know the answers. They know a number of options that's going to help fix that, and it's just that people won't work with them. They won't talk to them. They think that it's better that somebody that sits in a ivory building here in Sydney that can write up a strategy that'll improve the quality of life for our people and get them to take their rightful place in society. Over the decades, there's been hundreds of strategies developed to improve the quality of life for my people, and out of all those, and very good strategies and plans too, but there's no will to implement them. In fact, there's only two things that change in that strategy, and that's the date and the author. Everything else is the same. I think that if we can get some will from somebody, and we all have to work out, Aboriginal health is everybody's problem. We all have to work together, and there's underlying issues, and it was flagged a few times here this morning about, racism. Racism's alive and well in this country. I know in my suburb where I live, it's got signs all over the place saying, racism not welcome here. So that indicates to me that there is racism here, that's putting signs up to tell people we don't want it here. And that's good, but it's sad that's got to happen, that we've got to tell them. And it's those underlying issues. People don't fully understand how much richness we could make this country by sitting down and understanding about where we come from, where we belong, talk about our culture and our customs, and even the foods and the medicines. They're just cloned those things today from what my people were doing years ago. We had all those things in place. We had medicines to help us look after our illnesses and treat us. They 65,000 plus years, somebody back there in 65,000 plus years ago those people must have got it right. Non-Aboriginal people have this individualistic ways of doing things, where we've got this collective method where we all sit down together and pool our resources and our minds and our knowledge to try and our wisdom to try and come up with some solutions that'll not only benefit one person but benefit us all. Health to Aboriginal people is not just the health of an individual's body, it's the health of the whole community.
I certainly concur with Uncle Boe on those sentiments, which are real. And I think where my earlier point around, taking these opportunities for the rubber to really hit the road so it's meaningful, it's fit for purpose. And I think the only way we're going to be able to, I think, really break through those systemic barriers, which I often sort of refer to, well, we, you know, in the readiness and preparation for that. And you've got to be prepared. You've got to be focused and strong to really stand up and take that on, and for us to obviously make every effort to sort of break through. But I think being more specific around what's really required is the systems change, but also the systems reform and systems transformation. And I think it was quite clear this morning in terms of, you know, there was various iterations of and interpretations of where those systemic barriers lie, and particularly, you know, and a lot of that lies with government. So I think it's how we strategically sort of break through to capitalise on the goodwill in good faith to do things differently, because I'm just mindful, particularly from a Burke perspective, is that we've been screaming from the highest hilltops, particularly over the last 30 years, with several scathing reports, particularly that was tabled to New South Wales government through the New South Wales Ombudsman's Office. And here's a prime example, is that, again, I think what's worthy of highlighting too is just how patient and tolerant that we are as a First Nations people, that we're waiting for someone else to give the green light, and that needs to change. So I think in terms of that, that systemic reform that will bring transformation, that will, I think, provide the means, but not only the means, but I think more importantly, or equally importantly, I should say, is the provide the authorising environment where I think First Nations people are given every opportunity and the ability to make informed decisions that's supported by the evidence and a combination of data and research and the science and everything that goes with that. So I think there's some, you know, making some really broad statements here, but I mean, that's just a fact of, you know, what our aspirations are. And if we can't, I think, achieve that as a collective, because I think I'm just mindful too, is that as a community such as Burke, is that we were the first major, we were the first community that that launched the first major collective impact. And being mindful too, as First Nations people, we designed and created collective impact. Well, we had to. We've been here for well over 65,000 years. So, so I think picking up on Uncle Bo's point is that we've got to get back to the basics. And I think being mindful in terms of acquisition of land and access to water or water entitlements, we're having those conversations now. But I mean, if you look at communities like Burke, we own nothing. Nothing whatsoever. But we're still punching above our weight to convince and justify and jumping through all the hoops with government. But I think that's changed now over several years now, more specifically because we've parked government in the corridor momentarily until we went off and forged a new relationship with the philanthropic sectors and corporate Australia, and we returned, invited government back in, and now it's on our terms. So I think they're the sort of things that we're, you know, I'm mindful is that, and when I reference that, you know, we're punching above our weight, but we've still got a lot to do. So, and I think acknowledging, because I think it's the work that people don't realise what's happening in communities is that peace building, it's that nation building, and you know, it's that accepting other tribal groups that's been dispossessed of their traditional homelands, and that's the work that people don't see. But that's really important that we give that recognition and we welcome people to the table. And I just want to say, from particularly from a First Nations governance perspective, is that we've gone back to the basics, and we've established, in our case, a Burke Tribal Council comprising of all the First Nations group that call Burke their own. So in terms of my earlier point around that preparation and readiness, that's what we've been doing for quite some time, and we are serious about, and the grounding point for this is, of course, is that what no one argues with or debates or opposes is that we're striving for better outcomes for and results for children, young people and families.
So, of course, everything that has been said is so powerful. I think what we've come to learn over the last 20 years is that this problem is complex, and it's going to take all levels of society to work together, to collaborate, to start solving some of these big issues. It's not one single one of us, not Foodbank, not OzHarvest, not Indigenous people alone, and not government alone. Every single one of us has got to work together because everything's intertwined. We just keep hearing that. The history, the cruel and unjust history, and the future ahead of us have got to come together in order for us to move forward. And from our points of view, all I know is that at this time, it is the first time in the 19 years that I've run OzHarvest that I have seen a demand and crisis as big. Never before have I seen Australia like this. And so if there is any time for all of us to work together, Indigenous, white, government, philanthropic society, corporate society, this is the time. And we need to be bold and courageous, and we need to be innovative. And sitting in this room is so much innovation and so much goodwill. So a symposium like this is seriously a wonderful start and a continuation, because it didn't just start today. It's come together over so much time. But this is the forging of new, exciting ideas and actions, because I think this is a group of doers. So we can talk and we can blame, but really, you know, every time I point a finger, 3 fingers point back at me. It is up to every single one of us, and this is a beautiful cohort to start. So I don't have a simple solution. All I do know is we are now in a process of listening, of talking, of hearing, and trying to be as agile and nimble as we can to shift and change what it is we do to add more and more impact. Because what we've done is great. It's what we do in the future that's going to affect the future of this country. And there is no other time but now.
I'm going to go off script. I think they've already cleared out my office back at the work, so I'm coming to Ronni for a new job anyway. But I'll go.
You're hired.
Have they cleaned it out, Christina? Yeah, they've cleaned out my office. If anyone's interested in being the CEO, all the best. A couple of things, just an observation. Between Foodbank, OzHarvest and Multicultural New South Wales, and I'm sure Aboriginal Affairs, Sarah and others are the same, success is actually when you turn the lights off in the building that you're in, because you don't need Aboriginal Affairs and you don't need Multicultural New South Wales, you don't need Foodbank, you don't need OzHarvest. So if we're looking to these two to solve the problem, we're looking in the wrong direction, is the first thing I'd say. And government sometimes, not government, because that would be me. Sometimes society, this is being recorded, isn't it? Shit. I didn't swear. Sometimes society absolves its guilt by going, oh, we'll give you money. And that will then allow us to sleep at night because we've bought X number of meals or whatever. It's not that. There's no really easy way to say this, but to be honest, there's a breakdown in trust, is my simple understanding. The government doesn't trust, society doesn't trust empowering certain people to help solve this problem at a local level, because if they did, they would be giving them more money than they could ever imagine, because the cost to then try and solve this problem through health, dentistry, every other human thing that is imaginable that will then impact on these young people's lives if they don't have access to a basic human right, which is fresh food and water, is going to be a far greater cost than we could ever imagine as a society. So really what we should be doing is empowering people at the local level to say, okay, how does this work in your part of the woods? And how much money do you think you need? And then for goodness sake, use those learnings and that data capture so that we can share that, because it might have worked there and it might not have worked there or whatever. The second part is we've got a place up near Coffs Harbour that we go to whenever we can to have a break and disconnect from the world. And every time I look at those banana plantations, someone says to me, do you know that roughly 40% of those bananas will never ever get to the shops because they don't look good? 40% of the food growing on that hill gets thrown out before it even gets to the shops because it doesn't look good.
Tastes good though.
I don't know, but I've been to some places in weird and wonderful parts of Australia and I would love those bananas. There's plenty of times where I'm at home and I would love those bananas. So I also think there's a societal reframing exercise in terms of what good is, because for that to happen, for it to be a certain size and a certain weight, for it to even be sold, I think highlights how bloody entitled we are as a society, and that we're not going to live on this planet much longer if that's our expectation in terms of what good looks like, because we're going to churn through everything possible and we're going to need more and more chemicals and other things to try and give us this quality of life. So what can we do? Well, I'll tell you the first thing. If I was the Aboriginal minister, and I'm not, I'm going to spend the first 50% of my time getting whacked over the head in terms of how shit government is. That's not helpful. I've got 3 years in my role to try and build as much trust and do as much as I possibly can. That's not helpful. Equally, if I'm the Aboriginal minister, I've got to understand that I'm probably now the 50th or 60th person that has sat in front of you that's told you it's going to be different this time. I promise you, we got this. It's all going to be fixed. And that's equally not helpful. What are the small and tangible things that community leaders can do with government, and what can government do with community leaders to build trust? Because once we start building that trust, we saw it during COVID. Who thought Blacktown Council was going to have the fastest vaccination rates on earth? Shit, I didn't. No way. Did we think Kimberwali was going to embrace it in the way we did? Did we think some of our community and religious leaders were going to tell people to put a substance inside themselves that they knew virtually nothing about so they could see each other again? No. And did we see the incredible generosity of some of our community cook meals and help each other out in ways that we've never seen before? We know we can do it. It's just that we've all got to pull together for that common good to be able to do it. And I think this forum's great. What happens after this forum is the most important thing. What is the one thing that you are going to do differently off the back of this to help build that trust and that connection between the different parts of society that all got to play a role? But if we look to Ronni and Foodbank, I'm worried we're looking in the wrong direction, is my opinion. Sorry, Ron.
No, I love it. For 20 years, I have said my job is to put us out of business, because unless I put us out of business, we are perpetuating the problem. Apropos the bananas, that's costing us $36 billion a year, food waste is. $36 billion. Imagine what we could do to fix our society with $36 billion. And you're right. You look at those bananas and say, we'll eat them. You know, every single day, I kind of have to defend the supermarkets because I have people saying, but it's the supermarket's fault. But if we don't buy them, the supermarket won't sell them. If we buy them, the supermarket will sell them and there won't be waste. So you're right. We are, on the one hand, all entitled. On the other, we have to shift our behavior significantly in order for us to go and get to this better place. So I do love your cheek. I think it's fabulous, but it's what it's going to take. But it is all of our problems. You're 100% right. It is not mine, nor yours, nor Foodbank's alone. It is all of our problems.
Just picking up on that point, that it's a problem that, is everyone. We should all have. I think that's we're hearing has been one of the issues that needs to be overcome, is who has accountability for addressing this. So keen to sort of get, as CEOs and leaders of organisations that have made some significant inroads in this space, what advice or do you have an experience that you can share with us in terms of how you've broken down some of those silos and got people to work together, to collaborate, and in, you know, referencing our discussion, how can we bring it all together? And I know this is something that we're going to be exploring in day 2 of this symposium tomorrow, so really keen to get your insights into how we can start to do that and work together effectively. Does anyone want to kick us off?
Look, I think we tend to have incredibly short memories in Australia, and I think what will really upset me is if we don't reflect on some of the silver linings that we learned through the pandemic, because we did see people come together, we did learn new things, and I think for the first time ever, we actually saw food relief organisations in the same room as first responders, as medical professionals, as farmers, as supply chain experts, because we recognised we all had a role to play. And I think if we can take that piece forward, it's really important. And I have the same view as you. You know, I'm probably one of the only or one of a few CEOs in the country whose job it is to do myself out of a job. That's my KPI each year. I'm failing each year, no bonus for me. But I think we have to be real about what is achievable and then look a little bit beyond that. Because setting wild targets out beyond the horizon, it's unachievable, it's unrealistic, and we have to acknowledge that we have governments with 3 and 4 year terms. That's a given. That's a reality. We can't change that. So how do we work with that? So I think as CEOs, we have an obligation to set targets that are a little bit out of reach, to strive for them, and to make sure that we look beyond the obvious around the solutions. And that includes beyond the obvious people, because I think for a lot of the challenges that are here, let's put health at the centre. Let's put people at the centre. Let's go back to what Craig said at the beginning of the day. This isn't a numbers problem, this is a people problem. And if we feel the way we feel about it, how do we inspire and motivate others to feel the same way? Because they'll do stuff when they feel. The numbers don't do it for anyone. The Reserve Bank met again this afternoon. They'll make a decision on interest rates. We'll see a correlating jump in demand for food relief. We're seeing anywhere between 20 and 30,000 people a month reaching out for the first time, looking for food relief. Like Ronni, more than we've ever seen in the past. They're the realities. Now, how do we bust those myths? How do we get in there and shake it up? I'll be part of it.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Like at Future, pardon me, at Future Farmers Network, we've obviously got Caitlin McConnell, who you saw speak before this, who's leading the inquiry into food security, and an independent review. So not agriculture leading it, so making sure that it's not one area of government, it's an independent review of the whole sector. If I put my Vice President, Queensland Social Enterprise hat on, going into schools, I have never seen a young person 6 years old to 18 ideate a business that didn't put people first. Profit doesn't even come into the equation until we start buying food and paying rent, and then we're subject to how do we make ends meet. Never have I seen a child ideate a business for profit without putting people first. So I think sometimes it's a systematic issue that we need to look at how we are socially and how we're addressing that. So that would be my 2 cents.
Alistair, I know you've kind of, the work that you're doing in Burke is bringing together diverse groups of people. Can you share some of your experience in how you've been able to do that successfully?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, not losing sight, of course, when we first started, our whole experience was, as most would be familiar with, herding cats. In our case, it was like mustering kangaroos, bringing people together. But you could imagine, but I think once people, I think our approach in terms of, our organic and non-invasive and a respectful way of sort of doing things differently, bringing people together, because our focus was on, of course, was, the high and unacceptable high incarceration rates and the lack of value towards education, amongst other things. And I think it's those real health determinants that really sort of was our sort of key sort of driving force, particularly from a social justice perspective, and that's from a local perspective, of course, and not losing sight of the role of particularly Capo and which is quite critical under closing the gap and very important priority areas, etc. And so we looked at ways how do we sort of complement and value add to do our part and do our part of the heavy lifting as well, because again, it was, those systemic barriers and with really systemic and complex sort of individual circumstances, that we really narrowed down to individuals and, took the approach to work on the terms of that individual, that family, and really started unpacking that, using the data and the information that was readily available to really make a difference in the lives of, again, children, young people and families. But I think coming back to your point, Nat, is I think through the complexity of all that is how we've managed to simplify the complexity of that too. And we've narrowed that down to 12 set of principles that, and I'm really pleased to share with the audience present and online, of course, is that those principles were adopted by the New South Wales Board of Secretaries prior to Christmas, and just recently over the last 2 weeks they were also adopted as well from the Commonwealth Board of Secretaries as well. At least now we have the continuity and the consistency of I guess the next steps to really sort of narrow that down and our efforts down to improving our circumstances, particularly from a rural and remote perspective, and where we are logistically, which doesn't sort of help. But I think my point is that I think really where the rubber is the road now in terms of the next steps, and being much more, I think, precise around, it's that what's required as part of this process now is not getting ahead of ourselves, of course, but just mindful in terms of those steps. And they're really critical steps. It's an operational manual, it's a step-by-step guide, it's the roadmap, it's the blueprint. And I think that's what's going to get us through. And I think today, and particularly tomorrow, will provide that. And I think it's how I've got a set of, I've got a wish list that's quite comprehensive, but I'm not going to put people through that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rip that page off, I'm going to stick it on that back wall. So I think it's important that that we're much clearer around the aspirations and our needs. That's got to be fit for purpose. And the other point I'd like to make is that it needs to be customised and tailored to our individual needs, that it works for us. So I think, I hope that's answered that question, Nat.
Can I just add, I think education is so fundamental to all of this. We're looking at a new generation, and education, if I look at even our FEAST program, which goes into years 5 and 6 and into years 7 and 8, and the purpose of that is to teach sustainability, how to live yourself and how to manage our planet, and equity. And it's hopefully we are creating both eco warriors, climate action, the future of our country. And that's where, in those education programs, can you seed the future for a better, Australia, and for a more equitable Australia, and because that is where our future lies.
And just to that point, don't look to the schools to have to do that. That should start in the home. How are you in the home valuing food? How much of your food in the fridge gets thrown out? What's the messages you're sharing with your kids and your grandkids and your nieces and your nephews around exactly that? Because that is critical around that piece for building that awareness and understanding. We are a wonderful society in crisis. Floods, bushfires, pandemics, whatever. We are in crisis on this issue. It just doesn't have the societal awareness that it should. And I think that starts a lot in the home. And sometimes we look to others to do that, to build that, rather than looking inwards and building that level of awareness and appreciation. And I know, I watched my dad, post-war Italy, His plate, he gave the plate back to the waiter. We never went out to restaurants. He gave the plate back to my nonna cleaner than what he got it. Because every single morsel of food mattered to him. And that's a mindset shift in our generation. We don't have that same cherished appreciation of the food that I think others before us have gone. And I'm sure it's not every household, but I think it's incumbent upon every household to build that mindset.
You're 100% right, but this way, at least, where it's not in households, what we're finding, and all our research is showing, is that those kids go back home. And if they're not getting it from home, they're bringing it into the home.
Yep.
So you've got to fight it from all sides. But it's clear, and just on that, for anyone who's interested, this is to teach all of us how not to waste food. And I know I'm talking to the converted. It's our Use It Up tape. It's free from OzHarvest. You can get it on our website. But it literally, can you imagine that we have to teach all of us how not to waste food? But 40% of food waste is coming from homes. So there is a gap. This will shift and change it. The research, and it's done with Monash University and behavioral scientists, this is based on the likelihood matrix of our behavior. And we are willing to use it up, but we don't even know how. So this is going to teach you how not to waste food. And I'm laughing because, of course, in your family and any ethnic family and Indigenous families know not how to waste food. But it seems that as a society, we don't know how not to waste food. And it's costing us the earth. So there's some here and more to be had on the OzHarvest website. Share it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ronni. Bo, we might come back to you. Any advice or an experience that you want to share about how we all in this room and can bring in, those working in this space outside of this room as well? How can we better bring it all together and work to cut through the red tape and break down some of those silos?
Yeah, I've thought about these sort of things for a while, and I think that I always thought if you never had your health, you didn't have anything. But I think education is the key. I think teaching us how to understand each other. I think Australia doesn't understand its Indigenous people. They've got more of an understanding and more knowledge about Indigenous people overseas than they have about the things that happen in this country and the way we feel. They need to understand the historical and the contemporary issues that impact on our lives, that still impact our lives today, particularly that intergenerational trauma, where there's a lot of mental health in our communities. And come with all that is because we don't understand each other. We need to understand non-Aboriginal people as well as they need to understand us, but we need to come together and understand that. And it's like I said earlier, Aboriginal health is everybody's problem. I tell you now, we can't do it without you. Each and every one of you and everybody out there in the communities right across this continent needs to come with us to heal my people and get us to take our rightful place in society. I really only want two things, and that's inclusion. We haven't got inclusion in this country. We're over there, out of sight, and I want equity. That's why we've got closing the gap, because we've got this gap between Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people. Until we come up to the same level playing field as everybody else, we're always going to be behind the eight ball. We're all going to be disadvantaged, and we are the most disadvantaged, the most vulnerable and the most marginalised people on this continent. And we'll stay there while ever we sit around on our hands and do nothing. And we can't do it without you. And when people, even with our language, people associated the colour of my skin being black, they associated black with having negative connotations to it. We need to change the language, and when we talk about things, the Black Saturday fires, for example, they're fierce fires. 20 accidents out there are black spots. It's a serious accident spot. It's where, those sort of things. If I can't get a loan from the bank, I've got a black mark against my name, instead of having a bad credit. We need to change the language, and that's reinforced and promoted on our screens every night, and it's promoted on the written material. I think that if we can help change and look at each other as, instead of looking at my colour, look at my character, we're going to start looking at those sort of things rather than looking at my colour, because I tell you what, I still hurt and I still got pain. When I was born in this country, I was a savage. I had no civil rights whatsoever. The authorities could and did whatever they liked to me. And I tell you what, I went through a lot of pain and hurt. I was a very angry man when I was growing up in this country. It's just lucky that I had a very understanding mother that put me on the right track to ensure that I made something of me, because I could have ended up in a different place. I could have ended up in the criminal justice system. I had a brother removed. I felt the pain and the hurt, and my mother roaming around and rolling in the bed and moaning. With the hurt and the pain and the guilt for not protecting one of her children. I ended up getting a job in welfare to try and find out why did that happen. Why did that happen? And it happened because there's all these laws that passed where they had complete control, and could you imagine if somebody came along and took your child out of your arms and gave it away to somebody else and you never saw them again? Could you imagine that if you lived a rich and balanced diet in this country, and they come along and stick on reserves and give you a flour, and you end up with Devon and chips, and everybody else had a well-balanced meal? These are the sort of things that happened, and when I was growing up, often picked up by the local coppers and flogged many times. And I'm not the only one. It's happened to a lot of Aboriginal people. And I didn't understand why. In fact, I wanted to know what happened, because I went into the New South Wales Police, and I stayed there for 10 years, and it was one of the most racist places I've ever worked in, because it was all about control rather than working with people. And same with welfare. I got a job in welfare because I wanted to know what was going on in there as well. People just don't understand what happened to our people. How they had, we've got all these places we've got women there that are in Cootamundra Girls' Home that are all screwed up and don't understand. Non-Aboriginal Australia need to understand the history of this country, the Aboriginal history of this country. And when we do it, we have to do it with cultural sensitivity and cultural understanding. And until we do that, we won't come together, because there's one side that's got racism, the other side's got privilege. And if we can close that gap, we'll be on the track to joining our country together and living together in harmony.
Thank you, Boe. Well, look, I am getting the wind up, so we might just, one final thought. We'll get you to keep it to 30 seconds or less, but we might start with you, Joseph, and your final thought or message for the symposium for the day.
Unsurprisingly, a lot of the heavy lifting's falling to your community, because it's felt the most in your community right now, but please know that you're not alone in feeling that. This is a societal issue. Absolutely, it's disproportionately affecting some of our most vulnerable or isolated, but it's a societal issue. So please know that the programs and the initiatives that you're showing today are helping a lot of other communities that are either feeling this or are about to feel this. And I often talk about the Pacifica brothers and sisters out there. They're pretty much now number 2 on every underwanted statistic, and everyone goes, who's number 1? I don't need to answer that in this room, because you know who's number 1 on every unwanted statistic, but they're number 2. And I think as a society, we're only going to see more of the haves and the have-nots, and it's critical that you know that your leadership you're showing isn't just within your community, but it's for society. It's not fair, but we're very grateful for it, and we need to do more to empower those people on the front line.
I'm humbled in your presence and in this symposium, because by virtue of the colour of my skin, there are white and there are others. I was brought up in South Africa, so I know about inequality. And all I can say is, OzHarvest, our team will do whatever we can, and as a society, it is time to heal. And thank you for putting together a symposium like this, and more of these kinds of conversations, I think, are required.
Certainly from my perspective is that just want to make two comments, I think. One is, firstly, that I just want to extend an open invitation for anyone who wants to come to Burke to have a look at, I guess our experiences and what we're doing to really move the dial around parity and the entrenched disadvantage, etc. But I think what we're doing is we're moving away from the deficit model, and I think through food and through this movement we can certainly achieve that. And so I just want to make that point. which is an open invitation for everyone. The second thing is I just want to certainly highlight, but certainly acknowledge, that often gets overlooked is the generosity of community and the goodwill that's still in our communities. And even though our people are hurt, they're unwell, but they're still up for the challenge and they still have that sense of duty of care as well, particularly to our children and future generations that is yet to come. So I just want to make that final point, so thank you.
I think I've already said that. I think that inclusion and equity is important to me. I think if we can get a society that want to look at us and live together with us in harmony, I think we'll be in a better place. This country will be richer. You all know that this is we have the oldest living culture on this planet, and if that's not something to be proud of, I don't know what is. We've got so much to offer. We didn't always eat the food as that, because we also ate the ochre as well, because that was like a vaccination program for us. We ate that so to provide and look after the insides of our body as well. We can do this if you want to come with us, and you tell the person next to you and the person, everybody out there, we can do this. We can improve our relationship. We can improve our health. We can get to take our rightful place in society.
I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm committed, and I'm surrounded by people who know the answers, so I'm in.
Just to echo some of my fellow panellists, through COVID we saw OzHarvest, Foodbank Fair Share in the news every day. New South Wales, Queensland, Victorian floods, they were on the news every day. This is a crisis not dissimilar to any of that. This is an ongoing crisis, so the conversation just needs to keep happening. We need to keep talking about it. It needs to be on the news. These three organisations and others that support the sector just need to be talked about, so that there's transparency and everybody knows what's happening.
Can I just say that when I was young and all those things used to happen to me, I didn't have a voice. I wasn't a citizen. They made me a citizen of this country. You can help me by giving me a voice.
Yes.
Thank you so much to each of you for joining us this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a final round of applause to our incredible CEOs panel here today.